Hello everyone, my name is Jacob Woodard, and today I'm going to be going over Sprint 3 of our final project. So to begin, I would also like to address the previous implementations that have been made from Sprint 1 and Sprint 2. So in Sprint 1, what was added to my to-do list application was due date functionality. So essentially, it would be the task, let's say it's homework, and then it would say due in 5 days. That's just one example. It will also handle things that are overdue and tell you how many days it is overdue by. Next, for Sprint 2, I had the implementation of an assigner to tasks. So that can be blank because it might be yourself that's assigning the task, but I left that as an option in case people wanted to put their instructor or professor as their assigner for certain tasks that they are doing. Next, I also created the ability to put things in task groups and be able to search by that. So what I mean by that is, let's say we have homework as a task group. Let's say we put math, history, and science, and we each assign math, history, and science to the homework task group. When I go to my search bar, I can type in homework, and math, science, and history will show up. So that's essentially what has been done so far for my to-do list application, and today I'm going to be going over how I implemented a real-time digital clock onto my website. Right now, I have a lot of the functionality I want on my to-do list application, and I'm trying to add some cool bells and whistles to it to make it even better. So I'm going to go ahead and go over this JavaScript code. After I go over the JavaScript code, I'm going to address challenges that I faced, and then I'm going to pull up my web application so you guys can see what it looks like. So let's go ahead and start with my JavaScript code. So we can start up here at the top with the function. So I created a function called showtime. Essentially, I just named it showtime because I want to put the clock onto my web application. And we have a couple variables here. So we have variable date equals new date, which is essentially the current time and date. And then we have variable h, variable m, and variable s, which is for hours, minutes, and seconds. And so essentially what I'm doing there is I'm just getting the hours, minutes, and seconds of the current date. And then I created the variable session to distinguish between AM and PM. And then I have some code to define what that looks like. I have two if statements. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. So we have if h is equal to 0, we're going to set h to 12. So talking about 24 hours throughout the day, here in this scenario, we're saying that if h is equal to 0, it's midnight. And so we're going to set h equal to 12, and that's going to be AM. And so now we can go ahead and see what it's going to look like for PM, which is right here. So if h is greater than 12, we say h is equal to h minus 12, and we're going to have the session be set to PM. So what I mean by that is it's 1:45, so we'll use 1 as an example. 13 hours, we'll say the hours is greater than 12, so we'll say it's 13 hours. 13 minus 12 is 1, so we know it's 1 PM. And we're going to set that session to PM. So next, what we have is this section of code right here is essentially for formatting purposes. So we'll use 1 o'clock as an example. So we have this set of formatting rules for hours, minutes, and seconds. So if we're talking about 1 p.m., we're saying if the hours is less than 10, that would be 1 p.m. We're trying to involve leading zeros into what our clock will look like. So if you have like 12 p.m., 12:45, there's not a leading zero at 12, unless you're talking about the minutes or the seconds. But if you're talking about 1, it would be 0 and then 1:45 p.m. Same thing for minutes. So let's say it's 1:02. That 0, that's what we're adding in there for 1:02 because it's less than 10 minutes. If it's less than 10 seconds, we're gonna have a leading zero like 07, 08, 09. Then we get to 10, the leading zero is gone. So it's only if it's less than 10. So this next little snippet of code right here is we're setting variable time equal to some code, which is essentially concatenation. We're going to concatenate our hours, minutes, and seconds and our session. So we're going to concatenate our hours, minutes, and seconds by a colon. And then we're going to add our session onto that, which is AM or PM. So it would be like 1 colon your minutes, colon your seconds, and then the session. So let's go ahead and go over this highlighted code right here. So we have variable element, and we're getting this element, we're setting that equal to getting an element by ID that we have created into our HTML web page. So if we go over here we have our right here, we have our div ID, my clock display, and class clock. So this is what we have for our HTML page. So let's go back to our JavaScript now, just so you know where I'm getting that ID from. And what this code right here is saying is, okay, so if that element exists, that's what it means by if it's not null. If that element exists, my clock display, what we're going to do is we are going to update that HTML page with the current time. So that's what these lines of code mean. And so now lastly, we have the set timeout function. And this is important. We have set timeout, and then we're talking about our show time function next. And then we have 1000. The 1000 is really important because that is saying 1000 milliseconds. So 1000 milliseconds is equivalent to 1 second. So what this is saying is that every second that web page, the HTML page is going to be refreshed, and that's how the digital time clock is going to count up, because it's going to be refreshed every single second. So for example, 1:48 p.m. in 10 seconds, then 1:48 in 11 seconds, 1:48 in 12 seconds, and so on until we get to 1:49. And it's just going to keep on going. And then right here, we call our showtime function. Okay, so now I would like to discuss some potential, well, not potential, I want to discuss some challenges that I faced. So some of the challenges that I faced was honestly routing. I am not super familiar with JavaScript, so I did not actually have any JavaScript files in my web application until right now. So I needed to create a static folder. And so I didn't know where to create this static folder. I just knew I needed a static folder, and I needed to place my CSS in that static folder and my JavaScript in that static folder. And then I needed to correctly route that in my settings with the base directory function. And so I was unsure how to do that. And so that honestly took me an extremely long time to figure out how to get it routed properly. I was able to get through the code reasonably. I was still learning how to do JavaScript, so I was able to get through the code in a reasonable amount of time, but what honestly took a really long time was figuring out where do I put my static folder, and then how can I correctly write that in my settings. So when I finally figured out where to put my static folder, it's down here with my CSS folder, my JavaScript folder, which has my images and styles and the CSS and my script.js and the JavaScript file. If we go over to my settings, I finally was like, okay, well, this is the simple part. All I had to do is write these lines of code in my settings and just say, okay, this is our base directory. It's static CSS and static JS. So now whenever my HTML page or pages are being rendered, it will say, okay, look for the static files and put those on that page. And so, thank gosh, we finally figured that out. And so there was also one other problem that I had that I'd like to address right before I show you the web application. So if we go back to my JavaScript file, that's why I have this console.log. My JS is working. So I put that there because I couldn't see my clock. After I finally got that stuff routed properly, I couldn't see my clock on the web page, and I was getting really frustrated. And so I went to my web developer tools, and my JavaScript was working. As we can, is the console.log worked. It was being rendered properly. So I was like, okay, well, what could be the problem? So the problem arose from my styles.css. So this was the original CSS that I had for my clock, and it was essentially hiding behind my to-do list on a web application. And so I needed to correctly write the CSS so that my clock would actually show up onto my page. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run the page. Let's go pull it up, and there you go. You can see the clock running in the top left corner up here. And so this is also what I was talking about the leading zeros, is this 0 right before the 1. That's what I was talking about the leading zeros. And if you have the minutes, right now it's at 51, so we're not going to see a leading 0 there. But let's say that was 8 minutes, it would be 1:08, and that's where that leading 0 is coming from. So that is how I was able to get the real-time digital clock onto my website or web application. Thank you for watching. Actually, right before I end this, I did want to talk about Sprint 4. So for Sprint 4, what I would like to do is integrate a third-party API in some fashion. I'm not 100% sure what I want to do yet, but I would like to implement a third-party API onto my web application, and that is what I'm going to be planning for Sprint 4. Thank you.